I want to do this video right quick that I'm going to call a market for countries. You know, I've done this video, I've explored this idea in a couple of videos about, profiteers killing profits. I have a video called that. And, the Icarus theory, where the market regulates itself. People, may start out with a very high profit margin, but in one of two ways they destroy their own self. Either the company itself sees that their product is very profitable and making them a lot of money, so they flood the market with it, which the increased supply, of course, immediately drops prices. Or you have other companies seeing the profit that's being made by the one company, and you have other companies rush in to supply the product, and that does the same thing. Well, we've seen this, in everything from flat screen, high definition TVs to, the mortgage industry and the housing industry now. But I got to thinking about this in the realm of countries, and the ultimate profiteers are the government thugs, the government politicians. They're the ultimate profiteers because they take from the people and they give nothing. They're thieves. At least the profiteers that get blasted in the media these days give you something in return for your money. What happens is government profiteers, they leech off of the productivity of the working class. And so my idea is that a state must exist. I'm for a voluntarily funded military. I'm for private security forces. I'm for the most minimalist state that you can imagine. But my theory is, without a state, you get places like Somalia. I was just thinking, these conflict resolution groups that anarchists propose, and these private security forces, they wouldn't have been able to help that ship captain out in the sea. It was only by the power of a state military. That man never could have afforded to pay the cost for the resources required to execute that mission. I don't know, maybe it could have worked out from all the contributors in his group, but, private security forces, I think, would have been hard-pressed to solve that type of a situation. So I think a voluntarily funded military would have solved that situation just fine. So I do think there has to be a state. But what I also believe is that the more freedom there is, the more productivity there will be, the more wealth there will be. And I imagine that the wealth created by the working class in a free country represents the profit for the government profiteers that leech off of it. Because everything that the working class does is free for the political class, above and beyond what their effort was, because their effort was zero. So whatever they gain is profit. So if you have 99.99% freedom and you have just one barely tenth of a percent, political class, all this down here is a high profit margin for them. And so what happens? They start to cavort with other countries to shovel more of the wealth out. That's more of their profit. Here, look at all this productivity that's being created over here. Here you have some, here you have some, you have some. And then the government itself of the country, like the United States government, which would be the company itself, producing more of the product, smashing down the profit margins, our country itself not only shovels our wealth out to this place and that place, but our government itself comes in on more and more and more and a higher and higher and higher percentage of our wealth. And the government profiteers work just like the private profiteers. They eventually smother out their own profit because there's no more wealth to be sucked on. They've sucked up all the wealth and spread it out so far until they control all of the wealth, and the working class controls nothing or very little. And there's nothing left for them to take. And so what happens? They shrivel up and die. This is like what happened in, Russia. They controlled everything until there was nothing left for them to take anymore from the people. And the government just shriveled up and died. I say there must be a state, but it'll always destroy itself. And you can only hope that you find yourself in a place and time where you're left with a relative amount of freedom. And if you find yourself in a place that is not free, then it's your duty and responsibility and obligation to yourself and to your children and grandchildren to migrate and to get out of that situation and to simply, climb every mountain, swim every river required to get to freedom. And this will speed this process along of the government profiteers killing their own profit because the wealth creators will flee. That's what happens. Not only do they suck up the wealth from the wealth creators that are there, but the wealth creators leave, just like the jobs going overseas now. Wealth creators leave. So it's just interesting that the profiteers will kill profits, whether they're private profiteers or whether they're government profiteers. The government profiteers will do it much more because they're not smart enough to realize that they're about to commit, suicide. But the private profiteers are obligated to shareholders who keep them conscious of the fact, that they can't totally put themselves under. But the state will never stop. They'll always go over that precipice. And so I just thought that was an interesting concept, having a market for states, a market for countries where you see countries in various states of killing their own profit and allowing people to choose among what country they want to participate in. I think it's an interesting idea, and I think it's unfortunately a necessary one, and it's the way that life will go for centuries to come.